Good evening. You're watching the Kacee Allen Show. I'm your host, Kacee Allen. Glad to be back with you guys on this Sunday night. We have a lot to cover. We have a big show tonight. We're going to cover the first 50 days of Trump's administration, the ups, the downs, and everything in between. This is our first real show since January 15th. We last covered the Trump joint address at Congress and the Trump inauguration ceremony, which you can see on Rumble. Like I said, glad to be back with you guys. We have a lot to cover. We have some news to share about myself and the show. To give you guys some life updates, I am no longer with the Boone County Republican Party after I have moved. Their election process just took place, so if you're wondering why I'm no longer on their board, it is because I'm no longer living there. Therefore, I have no ability to be in that position. I'm extremely grateful for everyone in Boone County for helping my political career and giving me the support. We accomplished a lot. We were able to get everyone elected that we set out to get elected, including President Trump, TJ Roberts, and everyone I campaigned for. So it was very successful in 2024. Glad to be a part of that historic run, and I wish them the best of luck. With that being said, I'm no longer affiliated with any local political organizations, Republican, anything at all. So I'm strictly independent. We have our show, we have our X account, which we're posting daily news updates, and we're eventually going to launch a website. So stay tuned for that. But like I said, we're going to cover the first 50 days of Trump's administration. There's a lot to cover, from tariffs, Doge, you have Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, ton of news to get into. Obviously, we're going to talk about all the executive orders as well. The first major development within the Trump administration in the first 50 days was before the inauguration, when the TikTok ban went into effect for 12 hours at the end of the Biden administration. Google and Apple themselves did not make any actions. TikTok made the executive decision to ban the app for 12 hours, which left many liberals and many people all around America in the dark, which created a chaotic effect and left these people absolutely disoriented, and eventually praising President Trump for postponing the ban that will actually go back into effect next month in April if a deal is not met. Trump has even said that he will likely postpone the ban even longer if a deal is not met by April. Trump himself admitted there's a lot of value with TikTok with the United States. There's over 100 million Americans that use the platform, but the real reason they want TikTok banned is not because of national security threats from China. It's because of the ADL and anti-Jewish sentiment after October 7th. If you notice on TikTok, the pro-Palestine content has really reached a number unlike any other platform, which has really alarmed organizations like the ADL, Media Matters, and these Jewish organizations that fear the sentiment and backlash. Everyone knows about AIPAC, which funds 90% of U.S. congressional seats. Republicans and Democrats voted to ban TikTok, which essentially bans free speech in America and Americans' ability to communicate. And all these congressmen are bought and sold by the Israel lobby. It's very obvious. They want to say this is a national security threat from China. Most of them take money from China themselves. So it's nothing to do with the ethics and the security. It's everything to do with the interest of the lobby that funds them the most and relies on American support, which is the Israel lobby, ADL, AIPAC. It's all coincided with American politics and influences our political system. That is essentially the deal with TikTok. The ban was due to anti-Semitism, as they say, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel content that they did not like, and is really threatening the narrative. As you guys have seen, Ian Carroll, Candace Owens, Andrew Tate, all in the same day went and red-pilled audiences with millions of followers. We're going to move on to Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency that's ran by Elon Musk and was originally ran by Vivek Ramaswamy until he went to run for governor of Ohio. Doge is not an official department in the United States, but it actually is a 2-year program that can make recommendations on what programs are not efficient, need to be cut, or need to have some sort of reform, and Elon Musk is the head of this, which in my opinion is good, and there are some repercussions to worry about, but not the way the liberals see it, which is crazy. They think he's going to end Social Security. They think he's going to end all these programs. There is absolutely no way that any Republican will touch something that controversial. It's never happened, and it's not going to happen with someone like Elon Musk, who was a liberal not even 6 months ago. The chances of that happening are slim to none. Musk has to recommend this to Trump, and Trump will not do this. So that's obviously out the window. At the very most, they're going to fire people within those departments and hire new people. People are freaking out all over CNN and all over the left because they think Elon is this tyrant who's controlling the government. Yes, he may manipulate some contracts that benefit his companies, which could be a concern, but he's not the official president of the United States. He's not even an elected official of the government. He's just a government employee. I support in principle what Doge is doing, but in essence, we didn't vote for budget cuts. The number one mission statement was mass deportations, which we've yet to really see. It's funny how people are satisfied with, oh, hey, we're just going to cut all these programs. This is what we voted for. This is based. When you think about the deficit is $2 trillion and we're cutting $2 billion in some programs, yeah, it's good, but is that really making a monumental impact on what really matters? If you saw the recent resolution that was passed, it doesn't seem like the Republican Party has any interest in lowering the national deficit or the debt itself. The recent budget that was passed, which the only Republican to vote against it was Thomas Massie, promises spending of $300 billion in the next 4 years that could potentially run the debt up to $50 trillion in the next 10 years. If you guys remember the continued resolution back in December that allows the spending to continue until 2027, so it does not appear that they have interest to lower the debt itself, but they're going to tackle other programs like reforming agencies and making small cuts that, again, will not make an impact on the debt itself, but will help the programs be better. You could say with more efficient programs, maybe that brings in more capital over time, but looking at it from a strictly financial perspective, it's not necessarily benefiting us and actually eviscerating this abysmal debt. Other news with Doge is that Elon Musk and Trump are planning to go to Fort Knox in Kentucky to audit the gold there that has not been audited since 1950s. They claim there probably is some gold missing. We're not for sure, but there's a good chance because of it not being audited in nearly 100 years that it might not be all there, considering the incompetency that we saw over the last 4 years. We'll have to see how much of an impact that makes and whether we can track down some missing gold. So that's my overall take on Doge. I agree with it in principle, but when you're talking about fixing the national debt, we got to have some other solutions because that's not the answer. And yes, it does sound good. Yes, we're going to maybe take away Social Security from guys that are 300 years old. But again, is that what we're really after here? Is that really going to be the deciding factor in fixing this crisis? I don't think so. The biggest problem is mass deportation because that's what the base voted for. It was getting the illegal immigrants that Joe Biden and previous administrations allowed to come in here and assimilate into America and get $10,000 debit cards and all the nonsense we've seen over the past 4 years that illegal immigrants have been able to do to America. And in the first month of the Trump administration, only 37,000 illegal immigrants were deported. 460 of them were released after being apprehended. Border czar Tom Homan and ICE seemed very transparent at the beginning. They even posted daily deportation updates on their X page until 2 weeks in. The numbers started to drop to about 400 per day. Then suddenly they just stopped reporting them. Luckily, I was able to find reliable sources myself of daily deportation numbers that were reporting this. And after the first week of Tom Homan and Dr. Phil putting on the publicity stunt, you see that the numbers themselves don't speak to what the agenda is and what they're really trying to show you is happening. In spite of all of this, to show you I'm not kidding, Kayla Vitello, the ICE director, was fired after the first month by Trump because of these numbers being so low. And Trump himself has even said he's trying to make other accommodations to get these numbers up because they're being so low. And that's why you're not seeing these MAGA influencers report on this. You're not seeing Trump talk about this much because these numbers are really bad. They're saying, oh, hey, look at budget cuts. Oh, hey, look at this. We're going to solve peace in Ukraine. Again, these are good things, but why are we not looking at the problem itself? Within the first 50 days, they haven't even deported 50,000. They stopped even telling us how many people they were releasing after apprehension, which was 460 after the first couple weeks. I would imagine that number's a lot higher now. Trump said they're going to start saving flights, and they're going to find a more efficient way to start deporting these illegals. So you can clearly tell that mass deportations are not number one on the agenda. Recently, with the chaos in South Africa, South African farmers are being granted immediate citizenship to the United States, which again will increase competition in the United States for existing citizens trying to get jobs. And let's say the $5,000 Doge payment gets sent to people. That's more money we're going to be sending to people that we're just freely importing to the United States. I get the noble cause. I'm a Christian. I understand helping people out. But we've got to help ourselves first, and that means putting up an immigration moratorium and stopping this nonsense once and for all. Not even the fact that each illegal immigrant costs taxpayers $130,000 per. It's the fact that they're assimilating into our culture and they're changing the traditions and the values of America as we see it, which is shown in cities like San Francisco, Seattle, once great cities that are really down the drain now. And a suggestion I would make to the administration is to reopen Alcatraz prison that closed in 1963. You can house 30,000 prisoners and illegal immigrants there, which would be huge, considering we've let hundreds and thousands of them go because we don't have any space, which is also a big factor why we can't have these mass deportations, because we don't have the space considering how many people are actually here. There's also the possible talks about sending more illegal immigrants to Guantanamo Bay, which could be a viable solution. I have to say I'm vindicated here. I called this back in December. I said after Tom Homan said he's not going to do mass deportations, they're only going to focus on the 100,000 violent criminals. It was pretty apparent that this wasn't going to happen when they're only projected to have 300,000 deportations per year, maybe less. It's pretty clear that that was not the number one agenda. You got to follow the money. Elon Musk, the number one donor. Mira Madelson, number two. You can see where everything's headed. We need to see those numbers increase. We're going to be covering that daily on my X profile at KCR Allen, so check that out. We're doing daily deportation numbers. We're covering all sorts of numbers in this administration that these individuals are not even reporting to the public, which we're paying for their positions with our taxpayer money, and we need to see transparency and more deportations. And lastly, on immigration, the bill that was proposed in Mississippi, they talked about instituting a bounty hunters program to round up illegal immigrants to increase those numbers, which I fully support. We're going to move on to the tariff war, which has started at the very beginning of the Trump administration with China, Canada, Mexico, really all countries that have gotten away with imposing tariffs on the United States for the longest time, and Trump is finally about to make that end. He's imposed 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which is varied every single day in this negotiation process. He's leveraged these tariffs to get more border security out of Canada and Mexico, to send their troops to the border to secure it better, and the whole goal is to bring jobs back to America. That's the point of tariffs. Many people do not understand this. Tariffs are put into place to bring innovation to America, bring American jobs back, and not outsource them overseas, which we see with Toyota. Really, since NAFTA and the car industry happened, we just outsource all these jobs to other countries. It doesn't allow us to have independence, which makes us rely on other countries for valuable resources, companies, and things that we use every single day. The argument with tariffs is liberals will say, well, that'll increase prices. Yes, that may happen temporarily, but the whole point is to bring jobs back so we can have more stability. I'm okay with eating the price of tariffs as an investment to bring more jobs back to the country. I have to give Trump credit. He's done an excellent job negotiating with tariffs. This is one of the best things he's done. This is really the art of the deal concept and why he was such great in real estate, because he knows how to handle business with some of the largest leaders and really put the foot down and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is America's interest, and this is how you're going to handle things. As a businessman, you understand what's fair and what's not fair. Joe Biden was everything but a businessman. Trump himself is like, no, this is not going to happen. We're going to impose tariffs on you because you impose tariffs on us. It's only fair. And you've seen Canada and Mexico retaliate with their own tariffs. I do see this as an America First policy that will help America in the long run. The fact that iPhones can be made cheaper in China than the United States is a problem. We need to find a way to make essential items that Americans use every single day from a company that's made and manufactured in America. In breaking news this hour, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has stepped down after his 10-year run as Prime Minister. We'll have to see how that affects this tariff war and if Canada is open to negotiate with not only tariffs, but maybe even having them as the 51st state, which I think would be more essential and viable for their economy, considering how much they're struggling. Canada's GDP is only $2 trillion. We could probably afford that, and it would actually help us. And President Trump's administration has been really vocal about purchasing Greenland, the Panama Canal, and other areas that are strategic to the United States' interest. I fully support taking the Panama Canal back, considering thousands of Americans died building that for Americans to give to Panama, which they've given to China. Completely breaks what President Roosevelt put into place. So as Trump said, we're going to take it back. Hopefully as peacefully as possible. I'm not vouching for any violence, but you can see how China's infiltrated that and allowed their drug smuggling to proliferate into the United States. Moving on to Ukraine and Russia, there's been a lot of tension after Ukrainian President Zelensky's disgraceful visit to the White House. After Trump got him in line, Zelensky says he does want peace, but we'll have to see if that's actually true. It does appear, after all, that Russia is not the threat that the mainstream media has made them out to be. There was a deal made between the United States and Ukraine for the U.S. to get 50% of all rare earth minerals Ukraine is able to mine. With the U.S. having financial interest in Ukraine for these minerals, that's also going to include the continuation of U.S. military support to secure those minerals at our interest. It's not that we're getting these minerals for free, we're getting these at the expense of our security and our defense budget that could potentially go south if Russia ever decides to invade again. On the contrary, you have to consider with U.S. soldiers there, could that maybe deter Russia from wanting to make any sort of invasion or attacks in the future? Maybe it will. So that'll be good on Trump's resume if he can bring peace to this tragic war that the Biden administration did nothing to help. They haven't talked to Russia since 2022. They were completely in the dark with their communications, and all they did was just fund Ukraine's tragedy that they were never going to win. Nobody thought they were going to win. It was a complete loss for them the entire time. They were getting annihilated by Russia. We gave them $250 billion, as insane as that is. And imagine what that would do for America if we just kept that money. That war has taken over 500,000 people because of the United States, because of Ukraine, because of our terrible interests and terrible foreign policy decision-making. But it clearly appears ending the Russia-Ukraine war is one of Trump's top priorities. We can only hope for peace there, but we'll keep you guys covered on the new developments that happens with that. Moving on to our featured story here, and that's the Israel-Palestine conflict over the 50 days of this administration. Now, lots happened. The ceasefire deals have really gone back and forth. They've been broken, allegedly been broken by Hamas, but there's been some insight that Israel has provoked this themselves to further taking land. After October 7th, you've seen Israel literally bulldoze Gaza. You've seen them commit atrocities in the West Bank, which they want to take. And not to mention the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, which were taken over by Syrian rebels that were once trained by the CIA and the Barack Obama administration, along with the Israeli Defense Forces that have a vested interest in expanding into the greater Israel and taking more land. The first foreign leader to visit the White House was Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which went terribly bad. Some people said it was the art of the deal. It was based. But when you look at what happened, Trump vowed to take over Gaza and expel the Palestinians, forcing them to flee to Jordan and Egypt. But if these actions are taken into place, this would directly violate Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, and would further prove they're going with the Adelson money, and they're doing what Israel wants, which is expanding to what they call the Greater Israel. On top of that, Trump issued an executive order combating anti-Semitism on college campuses. They've been very vocal about this because clearly the administration is pro-Israel and they can't stand the anti-Israel sentiment on campuses. I condemn any violent protests of anybody, whether it's Palestine, Israel, or even Americans. It's not that these are violent protests. They're after the sentiment that they do not want people spreading all this information that Israel's bad or Israel's genociding the Palestinians before they take over Gaza and all this territory and maybe even go to war with Iran in the next 6 months. And that's why you've seen all Israel critics lose their check marks on X. This is a scary precedent because if you do follow the money, you'll see that $130 million does come with strings attached. How much they crack down on this, I don't know, but it's a very scary precedent considering they're already arresting people on college campuses that are at the head of these protests. Hopefully they don't actually criminalize our free speech on the internet because of being too critical of Israel's foreign policy. You've seen the repercussions. You get banned, you get ostracized, you get kicked out of Republican groups like in my case. I mean, it happens. And that's why I'm very vocal about this issue and will continue to be because I do not support our U.S. tax dollars going to Ukraine, Israel, or funding any of these mass genocides that are happening. And especially in Israel, because we all know what's going on, whether it's the corporate media, Fox News, CNN, the Republican Congress, Democrat Congress. They all take money from the same people, and they all have the same vested interest in making sure Israel gets what it wants. It's always been that way. That's just been the system. And that's why the Epstein files have not been released. If you guys saw the story with that, the Epstein files were supposed to be released by Attorney General Pam Bondi on a set date. What they did is they sent a bunch of MAGA influencers, Scott Presler and a bunch of people, to the White House, gave them some binders that said Epstein Files Phase 1, acting like the files had been released when all they did was release public files that were even further redacted. People didn't take the bait and quickly realize we didn't get the Epstein files. So even to this very second, people are asking them, what happened? Why didn't we get them? Pam Bondi says, oh, the FBI wasn't transparent and they didn't give us the files. So why would you tell the people that you have them and you're going to release them? That's a little strange. And then Kash Patel and the FBI says, oh, no, we're being transparent. And then they allegedly say that there's a leak or there's a mole in the FBI that's withholding the files. Are you guys just not communicating? What's the problem here? Because the files are clearly saved on a computer in the FBI database. Why can't someone with a security clearance go in there, get the files, and release them to the public? What's so hard about that? Maybe it's because there's something in the files that they don't want people to see. Maybe because it heavily implicates people that are involved in the administration or people that really change public opinion about certain narratives. That's probably the case. And as much as we were hoping to get this release, I don't think we're going to get it. I don't think we're going to get the JFK files. I don't think we're going to get the 9/11 files. And we're certainly not getting the Epstein files because it all implicates Israel. And everybody knows this. It takes nothing more than a Wikipedia search to know that Epstein was a Mossad agent. He was connected to Les Wexner, Robert Maxwell. I mean, it's not rocket science. Epstein had this blackmail ring from public figures to politicians to everyone that was really coerced and funded by Israel. I mean, it's pretty clear that was the case. And obviously, Epstein was tied to Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, very high-profile figures. Clearly, they do not want to release it. To me, it seems like they would just fool everyone by saying, oh, we'll send DC Drano and Scott Presler and all these MAGA influencers and give them these binders and that'll be transparency. And all these people are posting, this is the most transparent administration ever. Yeah, but we still didn't get the files. Even the influencers that went there are already moving on from the topic and don't even act like it's even a major discussion anymore. That's a problem. I'm not surprised at all. I called this last month. The people that are on the task force do not have any interest in releasing these files. Paulina Luna, Tim Burchett, all the people on the task force for releasing these files, they have no interest in doing so. Look them up, look who their donors are, look what they say about Israel. It's all the same, Republican and Democrat. And you've seen massive backlash after Ian Carroll, Candace Owens, and Andrew Tate all went on podcasts in the same day to give the message out that Epstein was a Mossad agent and this is why they're not releasing the files. The same thing I'm saying. And from that, it got massive backlash from Daily Wire, all the pro-Israel organizations saying, if you support Andrew Tate, you're just as guilty. It's just like all this nonsense that they're spewing, trying to compare the two. We're not willing to have an argument about who Epstein really was. When you say these things, all they do is freak out, and they have no rebuttal to the argument. That's what's really shifting the conversation in the Overton window, because for the longest time, people were canceled for talking about these subjects. They were really taboo. And this is great for free speech because we've never really had the liberation on the internet like now. It's almost like 2016, 2015-ish, where you can really just say whatever you want. I'm not saying censorship doesn't exist, it definitely does. But we're starting to see a shift in the conversation, especially from these mainstream voices, even on Joe Rogan. Like they're having this conversation about who really controls America, why we're not getting transparency, even within the Trump administration. So this is huge. Every day the Epstein files aren't released, it's just going to lose trust in the administration more and more. So if I were them, I would release these as soon as possible. You can understand there might be a minute things that are actually in national security interest that you could redact, but why not release the whole files? What's the holdup here? It just seemed really suspicious, and it seemed like they tried to just fool everyone with these binders. We'll just give them some props, and that'll be that. That's transparency. That to me is not transparency, and I don't think anybody else agrees with that. I don't know who made this idea. It clearly didn't work. It was not effective, and like I said, we want these files. But again, a lot of this information is already public. If you want to see it, just go look. A lot of this information is already public. It's not even much of a conspiracy anymore. It's just a fact. And lastly, there was a Bitcoin strategic reserve that was implemented that could be very beneficial in the future, but they have not vouched to buy any more Bitcoin. David Sachs, Trump, and the crypto department that they have there are essentially going to create this reserve to hold the existing 380,000 Bitcoin that the United States already have, although they have hinted at plans at buying more. In light of this news, everyone anticipated Bitcoin skyrocketing, but it in fact went down like 5% because they didn't vouch to buy any more. So hopefully they do buy more Bitcoin and add to this reserve, because even David Sachs said in an interview, the U.S. literally auctions off Bitcoin that they once seized. They never had any plan for this, and it would have actually saved taxpayers $17 billion had they not auctioned that Bitcoin off. And this occurred at the first ever White House Crypto Summit, in which Michael Saylor, Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong, and many of the Bitcoin and crypto activists attended. And before we wrap things up, another thing I want to say, it's been really weird to see all these plane crashes every day. It's almost like you look at your phone at 10 a.m. and it's like, oh, another plane crash, just like another day goes on. We should have like some sort of aviation task force to investigate all of these crashes that are mysteriously happening. And we can't just keep saying it's DEI for all these plane crashes. And yes, in some cases it is. Maybe there's clearly a bigger picture here that needs to be investigated. We got a lot to cover over these next 3 years in this Trump administration. Hopefully things go great. We also have a lot of plans with the show this year. We're going to have plenty of guests coming on. We have plenty of people booked and reoccurring guests that will appear on the show in the near future. So stay tuned for that. We'll be live tomorrow at 9 p.m. same time, and we'll see you then.